Hi everyone, this is probably the first part of the tutorial to show you how I made my tag. This is for MayTag swap over on Paper Pantry, and I just sort of wanted to start this because I'm not going to do it later. I want to do it as I go step by step. This is a completed tag minus the fibers that I will be completing later, and the theme was to use vintage. And I did a couple new techniques, so I sort of wanted to share these as I go. Like I said, this is new ventures for me on a few of these techniques, so I sort of wanted to share that. So this is the first technique, and this technique is basically showing you how I did the background of this particular tag. So I'm going to set that up out of the way and show you the first step. Obviously, take your standard tag, which I use the number 8 tags that Tim Holtz used. My first step was trying to come up with a way to basically do a background, and I recently had watched some videos about using the Studio Matte multi-medium product. So I ended up getting some of that and thought, okay, now what am I going to do with it? So I tried to do some transfers, but needless to say, with writing it does not work right. So I ended up finally just deciding to do a different technique, and this technique is taking tissue paper and using a stamp and stamping very lightly with black. I use the Indian ink black, which is I've had for a long time. It's good for watercolor. It's by Memories. And I did not want to, my first ones were very, very dark. If you notice on the tag that I showed you, it was very dark. So I found that if you did not stamp it really dark, it works better. So I did go to lighter stamping just by not putting as much ink on the pad. At that point in time, it was okay. I've got my tissue paper done, and I decided to go to the next step. The next step was using the Studio Matte Medium, painting it onto the tag, and then taking my tag and putting it, or my tissue paper over it, crumpling it up first so I got a little texturing, and then put that down and let that dry. Next step is going in and cleaning up the edges. Distressing it was the next part because that was part of the requirement. So I did do some distressing by using a sanding block, which is one of these Shark sanding blocks, or you can use your distressing tool, whichever. And then the other tool that I did use to the edges is taking my Tim Holtz distresser to the edge, and that's just done by scraping the edges, and that's going to get you some distressing on the edges as well. So once I got to the point that I was satisfied with my distressing, my next step was to gently start doing some blending. And I ended up using the antique linen distress ink, which is this one right here, and taking my blending tool and taking along the edges and doing some distressing and making it look a little more old looking, as you can see in certain areas. So once I got to that point, then if I still didn't like it, I was able to wet this tissue paper down and peel some more of it off, so you can see in certain areas that I don't have all the tissue paper actually there. And I also took the sanding block, like I said, over this again to get some more distressing. When I got to this point, like I said, I did do the distressing of the edges, and the edges, needless to say, really got roughed up and distressed, and got a little more texturing to it that way as well. And the final part to this was basically just basically trying to distress the best you can, and play it by ear how much you want to distress. Once you get to this, you can sort of decide if you've got enough distressing or not. When you get to this point, then I take my walnut distress ink stain and do a little more distressing and adding a little more color. I do the method by just twirling it along the side to begin with to get a little color onto the tag. Everybody has a different way to do it. This is how I sort of do it. It sometimes will take a little more ink in certain areas, like in that corner, but it is a way to get some extra distressing in. The other way that you can do this, and this is sometimes what I'll do as well, is just taking it along the edges like this and taking the tool Now, as you can see, this does tear your sponge up, so you always want to make sure you have enough of those extra sponges around. I always make sure I have a good supply of them. And once I got to this point, if I decided that it looked like it needed a little more distress to some of the edges, I would go back with my distressing tool and re-distress certain areas and get it even more peeled back. It depends. Now, what you could do is something that I sometimes will do is come back with a really, really sharp knife, and you can sort of also peel some of that paper back and give it a little more kick with it. It's going to leave some trash behind. I also go to the back of my tag and try to pull some of it off the back. Be very careful with this technique because this knife is very sharp. And once I get to that point, then I'll go back, take my walnut ink, and just keep really where the areas that I highly distressed. I'll just really go back over that area and get rid of the white that I just pulled off of it pretty well. And once I'm satisfied with that, I put this to the side, and the next step is to do some glimmer misting. The colors I used on this tag were Garden Fairy, the New Bubbles, and the other background color is Lemon Zest. So those were the three distress mists that I did, glimmer mists that I did use. And basically this is what the tag looks like when you get it dried. Now you can notice these women are very dark on this tag. This is one of them when I finally decided they were still too dark. But you can see the different distressing areas. Like I said, if you want to go even further, wet the tag down. You can peel some more of that tissue paper off. And this you can sort of, hopefully you can see there's some green and yellow in there. And then there's also the iridescent color. Once I get done with the distress of the glimmer mist, you can go back over, because sometimes it'll lighten up your colors of your edges, and just go back over those edges again with your walnut ink stain, distressing stain. So that's pretty well how I did the background. I'm going to quit this video at this point in time, and when I come back, I'll set up to show you the next steps. Have a nice time. Please stay put for the next part.